having been born into an army background, that martial music, military music was so much ingrained in my head. Your country comes first, always and every time. The challenge was to become operational on an aircraft as soon as possible.
My guest today is Air Commodore Ashok Chibber, an alumnus of National Defence Academy, Pune, with over 35 years of experience as a fighter pilot in the Indian Air Force. In 2001, he was awarded Ati Vishishta Seva Medal by the President of India and was nominated for a course at a prestigious National Defence College. He has been a qualified flying instructor, commanded 2 frontline fighter bases, and served as a deputy commandant of the Air Force Academy in Hyderabad, amongst many other field and staff appointments. During his term, Air Commodore Ashok has traveled extensively, gaining global exposure through his tours across USA, UK, Middle East, Southeast Asia, Europe, and Australia. He superannuated in 2004, post which he set up a ground aviation academy for aspiring pilots, collaborating with flying schools in India and overseas. Additionally, he is a consultant specializing in operations, air safety, and training. Air Commodore Ashok holds an MPhil in Defense Studies with a major in disaster management. He has also authored 2 books of short stories, some based on his experiences as a pilot, and some are fictional. I'm delighted to introduce Air Commodore Ashok Chibber in this spirited conversations with defense veterans. Thank you for your time, sir, and your willingness to have a conversation with me.
Thank you so much for having me here on your show.
35 years as a fighter pilot is no mean feat. So if you can explain your journey in one word, what would that be?
Oh, it would be extraordinary, exceptional, and satisfying.
Wonderful. So what made you join the Air Force? Is there a story there?
Oh, yes, there's a longish story, which I will try to keep it as summarized as possible. See, my father was in the army, and having been born into an army background, into an army family, and living in an environment which was full of army personnel, it was but natural for me to be drawn towards the army.
Okay.
As a kid, somehow, that martial music, military music was so much ingrained in my head that I would instinctively start marching whenever I would hear that band. Okay. So much so that in one of the my father's unit functions, the band was playing and I kept marching behind the band for almost 4 or 5 miles as a young boy of 4 or 5 years. And from there it started that I wanted to be in the army. I appeared for the National Defence Academy examination, where my first choice was Army, second was Navy, and third was Air Force.
Okay.
But I would say somewhere, in my hand, somewhere it was written that I will become a pilot. And when the merit list came out after all the tests were completed, it just so happened that I scored more marks in the Air Force selection than in the Army and Navy. Hence, when my call-up letter came to join the National Defence Academy, it was as an Air Force cadet. I was a little disappointed at that point of time, but when I joined India and I found that all my friends, who were there with me, they were all Air Force cadets. And even though I had an opportunity in my third term to switch to Army, I said, I will just continue, because when I asked my father that, I'm going to be joining the Air Force, so he told me a very, very pertinent statement he made. He says, if you have decided to join the armed forces, the color of the uniform does not matter.
Wow. Yeah.
What matters is how you perform in that uniform. So I said, okay, I will continue with the Air Force. And then as a cadet in the flying training establishments, we had to make a choice whether to join the fighters or the transport or the helicopter stream. And just few days before we had to give this option, there were 3 MiG-21s which came to the base and they did a aerobatic display. The moment I saw that, I said, fighter pilot is what I'm going to be. Nothing else but Air Force fighter pilot. And that's how I got into the Air Force, being a fighter pilot.
But looking back, would you rather join the Indian Army, or are you happy with the choice that you made at that time?
When I reflect upon the 35 years that I've spent in the Air Force and look at my initial, ambition to become an army officer, I think whoever made the choice for me to join the Air Force did the right thing, because I would have been a misfit in the army.
Okay. Why do you say that?
Because my outlook to life was, of being carefree. At the same time, yes, the discipline, yes, but more of a carefree attitude, which in the army or in the Navy is a little more constricted because the discipline is very strict there. Not that the Air Force does not have discipline. It has discipline, but there is much more, I would say, openness in interpersonal relations. So now when I look back at it, I said, thank God I joined the Air Force.
Fighter pilot means that you would be put across or sent across several missions where you are fighting the enemy. Any particular mission that you can say your best?
I will tell you that when I joined the NDA, the formation sign that we wore on our shoulders, it had a motto. It said, service before self. What does it mean? Service before self is that the service that you have joined, in other words, the organization which you have joined, that will always be kept at a higher level than your own personal requirements, needs. Okay. So that was so, I would say, deeply ingrained in us at the National Defense Academy, that for the rest of the life, service before self became a way of life. Now, when I joined the Air Force as a fighter pilot, within 2 years of my joining, I was commissioned in 1969, and 1971 the war broke out. So I was still a under trainee pilot on the NAT aircraft, and hence I could not participate actively in the missions that were flown. But my squadron was an active participant in the war, and we were, few of us who were not yet ready to go into war were part of the support system. We supported the pilots who were actually taking part in the, missions. We would prepare their maps. We would, have their aircraft loaded with the appropriate ammunition, which they were required to neutralize those targets. So we were doing that kind of a thing. My squadron was operating from the east. So from 3rd December 71 till 8th of December, we were operating from Kumbhigram, which is near Silchar. And then as the war progressed, we were moved to Agartala. Agartala was a very interesting place to be operating from for 2 reasons. One, the runway was very short. And the fully loaded NAT would get airborne on the last slab. That means if there was an emergency on takeoff, the pilot was gone. But it was that critical, and yet all missions were successfully flown. The second reason was that just across the border was very close from Agartala. We could see the bombs dropping and the mushrooms, billowing all over the place, and the sound, the booming sound of the guns, etc. So that was as exciting as having participated in the war itself. So that was one experience. Though of course the regret remained that I did not fly a mission myself into war at that point of time. I would unhesitatingly say that that motto of India, service before self, and followed by the Chetwood Code. I don't know whether you're aware of the Chetwood Code. Field Marshal Chetwood was one of the British, generals. He laid down a code of conduct.
Okay.
That said, your country comes first, always and every time. The welfare of the men you command comes second, always and every time. Your own needs come last, always and every time. So that I would say was a very overwhelming statement made by Sir Chetwood, which has been firmly ingrained in many people like me, and we continue to follow that throughout our service career. And surprisingly, it also has helped me in my post-retirement engagements wherever I have been.
What has been your greatest challenge so far in the service?
In the growing years in the Air Force, the challenge was to become operational on an aircraft as soon as possible, to be available to the service to fight a war if it ever comes again.
Right.
Okay. So in that respect, we trained well, we trained hard, we trained with experienced pilots guiding us, and that became a way of life for the rest of my life in the Air Force. There were courses that one had to, go through, various courses. Like I was selected for the instructor's course. I underwent an instructor's course. I became an instructor. Now the challenge that you speak about was that when an ab initio cadet comes to you, you have to transfer your skills, flying skills, to him. Teach him how to fly. It's something like a bird has got little babies, and it's teaching it how to fly. It just pushes it out of the nest and it flies. Here you don't push the guy out of the thing. You guide him, you teach him, you nurture him, and then take him through his paces, building up his confidence as he grows in that training period, to be able to handle that aircraft eventually as a weapons platform. So that was one thing. And yes, flying, you keep changing the aircraft. I started with Hunters, then I went on to ATS, then I went to MiG-21. In MiG-21, I had a very interesting thing. We were doing a practice combat mission in our local flying area, and my aircraft caught fire. And I had to eject out of the aircraft. And that was I would say a very exhilarating experience to leave an aircraft, a sick aircraft. But that was part of the game. We were trained that if you cannot save the aircraft, you save yourself.
Right.
So that ejection, and I had to come down by parachute, and that was I landed smack in the middle of Kaziranga Game Sanctuary in Assam. So that was an experience, all right. Yes, it was. Yeah.
So it's interesting you mentioned this. You use the word exhilarating. However, I'm sure when you are in that situation, right, where your aircraft caught fire and you have to eject, what went through your mind?
No, see, our drills are so fine-tuned. When you're on the ground, you're practicing for any eventuality.
Right.
Okay, so when this actually happened to me, I carried out the procedure, and I had a leader along with me, who, when he saw that the aircraft was really going to go out of control very soon, he ordered me to eject out of the aircraft. And I had no hesitation in pulling the grips and out. In no time I was out and
Right.
landed there. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Has there been any failure or any failure story that you would like to share with us?
I would say that I won't call them failures.
Okay.
I would say maybe disappointments.
Okay. Fair
Okay.
enough.
I will just rephrase that word
Sure.
to call it as a disappointment. Yes, there have been many disappointments, but the kind of training that you undergo, it makes you overcome that disappointment in quick time. Because the more you think about it, the more you talk about it, the more you feel about it, it's going to bring down your own personal morale, which is bad for any individual, whether in the services or outside. One must get over it as soon as possible. So those disappointments that I talk about were not of a permanent nature. They were, transient, I would say. And yes, in everyone's life, some kind of disappointments do come. And I had my share, and that's it.
We all know that this is transient in nature. We all know that this too shall pass. There's a very famous phrase that says, this too shall pass. However, when you're going through that situation, right, there are some things that we tell ourselves. And no matter how disappointed you are, at that moment, you do feel vulnerable. There are certain emotional factors that take over, right? Now I'm asking you directly as a person, right? What do you think you did to tell yourself, to shake yourself and say, this too shall pass?
I, as an individual, learned from my father that in any situation, however grave it might be, never lose your cool. If you remain calm and don't react immediately to a situation, you are going to see that whatever was bothering you is going to pass by very fast. The moment you react immediately, even in your personal life, you would have seen that if you react immediately, there is going to be a problem. Some problems are unsurmountable, and that creates a void, whereas majority of them are minor issues which we, because of our reaction, try to create a big hoo-ha about something, or just to use that phrase, make a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah.
So that is it. But yes, there were challenges, there were disappointments, but we overcame them. I had to really call upon all my personal traits to play into the system to make sure that I do not allow my disappointments to spill out and affect others.
Okay. Now that you mentioned traits, and I caught that, what are these traits? If you can just name a few.
Like I said, in my own view, I had formulated something called as the CID in bracket raised to the power 3.
Okay.
3 C's, 3 I's, and 3 D's.
Okay.
So I would, if I were to enumerate them, it would be, first C is competence. If I'm competent, then I don't think there would be any issue as far as the work environment is concerned. Because I know my job, I've learned my job, and I'm competent in executing it. Okay, so I must build up myself to that kind of a competence. The second is courage. And courage is of two kinds. One is physical, one is moral. Okay. Physical courage, it comes through your exercises, everything, keeping yourself physically fit. Moral courage is to stand up to something which is wrong, and to be able to speak about it in any environment without being offensive in nature. The third C is character. If as an individual, my character is good, I'm of a good character, nobody can touch me. But the moment my character becomes, like that good old song, iska character dhila hai. Okay, so if the character is dhila, it is weak, then you're susceptible to so many things, corruption, I would say, environmental advances, and all those things come up, and then a characterless person can never succeed in life. So that was the 3 C's. Then I learned that 3 I's. First and foremost was integrity. If I'm a person of high integrity, then there is nothing that can be pointed towards me. So I must ensure that whether somebody is watching me, not watching me, my integrity is of the highest level. Second is initiative. In the armed forces especially, initiative is a very, very important trait that is required to be there in an individual. So many times, things happen at the spur of the moment. And if you wait for a decision to come from somewhere, it'll be a case of that, for the want of a nail, a shoe was lost. For the want of a shoe, a horse was lost, and so on and so forth. So you got to take that initiative and take a decision immediately, right or wrong. You take a decision and then stand by your decision based upon your convictions. And the third I is innovation. So many times, even at home, like I'll give you example in your own kitchen, atta khatam ho gaya hai. So you say, okay, today we'll have bread. You're innovating the dish that you want to make. So innovation at a different level in the armed forces. Okay. I need some kind of things to work with. I don't have those implements. I innovate. Give you an example. In the jungle area, you have those talwars to cut the grass. These are specialized, I would say, implements. In one of my stations, we were short of this, and we were out in the wilderness. And we found one old, truck, and it had those leaf springs. We removed those leaf springs, hammered one end into, to make it sharp, and then we used, and all our area became clean. So it is, you're innovating something new is coming. And 3 D's that I talked about is dedication. I, as an individual, must be dedicated to my job. If I'm not, then there's no point being there. Devotion to duty. Somewhere I had read the earlier point that I mentioned about dedication. Dreams and dedication are a powerful combination. If these combined, you have a dream and you're dedicated, you will achieve your aim. Devotion to duty needs no explanation, and encompassing all others is discipline. Both environmental discipline and self-discipline. If these 9 traits are there in an officer of the armed forces, then he's, I would say, on the right lines to becoming a leader. And along with these 9 traits, a good leader needs 2 more. One is a vision.
Mm.
You have to have a vision, and you have to have trust and faith in your subordinates.
Mm.
So these, I think, are the traits which matter most. And I would like to believe that while I propagated all these to my colleagues and subordinates, I would like to believe that I also imbibed it myself.
Awesome. Awesome. Something new that I've learned, and an abbreviation CID to the power of 3.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So thank you so
No,
much.
I will narrate all because all were very important to me in my life in the Air Force.
Sure, sure. Recently, I've also saw you tweet about meeting Rakesh Sharma.
Oh, yeah. Yes. CID 3 whole square. That's applicable even in the civic street. As a leader, you need to have tell your people what you expect out of them. My father
boundaries.
My father used to always, have this placard on his office table. It's bad to be too good, but don't ever become a spoke in somebody else's work or in somebody else's progress. And I started writing that and collecting those stories. And so now I can call myself an author too.